My wife gave my suits to her new man. He wore one to an interview at my company. My name is Patrick. I am 46 years old, and I want to tell you about a Tuesday morning in October when a man I had never met walked into our conference room wearing my suit and did not know who I was. I knew who he was. I had not known, until that moment, what he was wearing. Let me give you the full picture, because without the full picture, this story sounds like a dark comedy, and it is not a comedy. It is the kind of thing that happens at the intersection of a marriage ending badly, and the world being, at certain moments, very small. Vivienne and I were married for 11 years. The marriage ended 18 months before that Tuesday morning, officially, though it had been ending quietly for longer than that in the way that some marriages do, not with a single rupture, but with a long, slow leak that you keep trying to patch until the day you admit to yourself that there is no more material left to patch with. I will not assign all the fault to Vivienne. Marriages do not collapse because of one person, and I was not a perfect husband. And honesty requires me to say that clearly before I say anything else. But I will say that the specific way the marriage ended, the specific details of how I learned it was over, those were Vivienne's doing entirely. I found out about the other man on a Wednesday evening in April. His name was Derek. He was 39, 7 years younger than me, and he worked in marketing for a firm across town. Vivienne had met him at a professional networking event 8 months before I found out he existed. By the time I found out, they had been together for the better part of a year. This is the detail that has always been hardest for me. Not the betrayal itself, which is its own thing and takes its own time to process, but the arithmetic of it. 8 months. Which meant that for 8 months I had been coming home to a marriage I believed was simply struggling, applying effort and patience to something I thought could still be repaired, while on the other side of it, the repair was no longer the goal. I moved out in May. We agreed, without much discussion, to separate and then divorce. There were no children. There was a house and some investments and the usual inventory of a shared life that had to be divided. The division of personal property was handled, for the most part, through a combination of attorneys and a single afternoon in which Vivienne and I went through the house room by room with a list. It was a civil afternoon, which is to say it was very quiet and very careful, and both of us were performing a composure we did not entirely feel. Toward the end of the afternoon, Vivienne asked about my clothes. Specifically, she asked whether I intended to take everything from the closet in what had been our shared bedroom, or whether I was going to leave anything. I told her everything in that closet was mine, and I would arrange to collect it. We agreed I would return the following weekend with boxes. I came back the following weekend. The closet was not as I had left it. The dress shirts were there. The casual clothes were there. But the suits, 6 of them, which I had accumulated over the course of my career with some care and considerable expense. 2 of them bespoke, and the rest from a tailor I had been using for nearly a decade, the suits were gone. I stood in front of the empty section of the closet for a moment. Then I went downstairs and found Vivienne in the kitchen and asked her where my suits were. She said, with the specific quality of calm that people use when they have prepared for a question, that she had donated them. I said I was sorry she had donated my suits. She said yes, to a charity that assists men entering the workforce. She said she had done it a week ago. She said she had thought I had already taken everything I wanted. I told her I had specifically said I was coming back for everything. She said she must have misunderstood. I looked at her for a moment. I had been married to this woman for 11 years. I knew what she looked like when she was telling the truth, and I knew what she looked like when she was managing a situation. She was managing a situation. I did not say that. I said I wanted the name of the organization so I could try to retrieve them. She said she did not remember the name offhand, but would look for the receipt. She never sent the receipt. I hired a tailor and replaced the suits over the following months, and I moved forward the way you move forward after a marriage ends, which is to say imperfectly, and with a considerable amount of recalibration. Now I need to tell you about my company. I am a senior partner at a mid-sized management consulting firm. I have been there for 16 years. I am involved at the partner level in hiring decisions for senior roles, which means that several times a year I sit in a conference room and interview candidates for positions that matter to us. In October, 18 months after the separation, about 9 months after the divorce was finalized, we were interviewing candidates for a director-level position in our operations practice. It was a serious role. We had received strong applications. I had reviewed the resumes in advance, as I always do, and I was expecting a productive week of interviews. The third candidate of the week was scheduled for Tuesday morning at 10. His name on the resume was Derek Calloway. I want to be precise about the sequence of what happened in my mind when I read that name the week before. There was a moment of stillness. The kind that happens when you read something and the information moves through you more slowly than usual, because some part of your brain is asking, are you sure about what you just read? Then I checked what I knew about Derek. His last name, his profession, marketing, the firm across town. The resume said marketing. The firm matched. I sat with that for a while. In the end, I decided to proceed normally. I did not recuse myself. I did not flag it to my partners. I told myself this was because I was a professional, and the man deserved to be evaluated on his merits, and my personal history had no place in a hiring decision. That was partially true. The other part of it, the part I am being honest about now, was that I was curious. I am not proud of the curiosity, but it was there. Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock. Derek Calloway walked into our conference room. He was younger looking than I had imagined, or perhaps he just carried himself young. He had good posture and the practiced confidence of a man who had done interviews before and knew how to present himself. He shook hands around the table. He settled into the chair across from the panel. He was wearing a suit, a dark charcoal suit, well fitted, with a subtle chalk stripe. I know that suit. I know it the way you know something you selected yourself and wore for years and had altered twice to account for minor changes in your body. I know the particular drape of the jacket at the shoulders because I had stood in front of a mirror in a tailor's shop and considered that drape for longer than most men would consider it reasonable to consider a jacket's drape. It was my suit. I sat across from Derek Calloway and I looked at my suit, and I thought about Vivienne saying she had donated it to a charity that helps men entering the workforce. She had given it to Derek. She had given my suits to the man she had been seeing while we were married, and he had kept them. And he had worn one of them to an interview at my company, and he did not know who I was. The interview lasted 45 minutes. I want to be clear about how I conducted myself during those 45 minutes, because I think it matters. I asked him the same questions I would have asked any candidate. I listened to his answers. I assessed his qualifications as I would have assessed anyone's qualifications. I did not give him an easier time than he deserved, and I did not make it harder than it should have been. Whatever had happened between him and Vivienne was, in his mind, entirely separate from where he was sitting and what he was trying to accomplish. He did not know I was Patrick. He knew my name, because it had been on the interview schedule, but Vivienne, I learned later, had never mentioned my last name to him during their relationship. She had, apparently, kept those parts of her life carefully separated. He had no idea. After the interview, when the candidate had left and the panel was discussing him, I excused myself briefly. I went to my office and I sat down and I looked at the wall for a few minutes. Then I went back to the conference room and I participated in the evaluation. Derek Calloway was not the strongest candidate we interviewed that week. That is not something I am saying to justify anything. It is simply true. His experience was relevant, but his answers in 2 of the key competency areas were thinner than what we needed for a director-level role. We had a candidate the following day who was demonstrably more qualified for the specific demands of the position. We did not hire Derek Calloway. We hired the other candidate, and that was the right decision. And anyone on the panel who reviewed the notes without any context would have made the same call. After the decision was made, I told my managing partner the full story, not because I had done anything wrong, but because I believed he should know, and because keeping it to myself felt like a weight I did not need to carry. He listened to the whole thing. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "He wore your suit to a job interview here." I said yes. He looked at me for a moment, and then he did something I did not expect. He laughed. Not unkindly, the way you laugh at something that is genuinely absurd before the other dimensions of it settle in. He said, "Patrick, that is either the worst luck or the best story I have ever heard." I said I had not yet decided which. I thought about calling Vivienne. I thought about it for several days. I thought about what I would say and what she would say and where the conversation would go and whether it would give me anything I did not already have. I decided not to call. What would it accomplish? She already knew what she had done with those suits. Whether she had given them to a charity or given them to Derek, she had known when she said she did not remember the name of the organization. She had managed that situation carefully. Me calling to tell her that the situation had arrived in her ex-husband's conference room, wearing charcoal chalk stripe, was not going to change anything about who she was or what she had chosen. Some things you simply carry forward with you and file under the broad and inadequate category of things that happened. My suits are good now. The new tailor I found is actually better than the old one. The bespoke work fits me well. I have moved forward in the ways that matter. But I will tell you this. Sometimes, when I am running an interview and a candidate walks in wearing something well-made, I notice the suit the way you notice something when you have a specific reason to. Just for a moment. Just long enough to confirm it is not something I recognize. It never is. But I always look.